getting to work in this industry, first of all, 99% of the people in it, I hope 90, maybe 80 these days, love what they do. Because if you didn't love this, why would you live this life?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a hard life. And then also to find some joy in that struggle, right? Like when people pass on like an exclusive pitch, I will write back like, thank you for letting me know. A publicist's second favorite word after yes is no, because it gives me clarity about what the challenge is. We're not going to work together on this one. It doesn't work for you. That's fine. It allows me and the team to like kind of come up with something else that might work. And sometimes you work on that big story and it's Hollywood Reporter breaking Gilmore Girls, or you get like New York Times and Hollywood Reporter and IGN reporting on the return of EC Comics, right? And you just know you're in the moment, and you just gotta appreciate that. But you also have to appreciate when you're just grinding it out and you're trying really hard to place that exclusive excerpt that you just haven't connected with the right reader or the right outlet yet, and you have to find the joy in that, you know.
David is one of the sharpest minds when you're working in comics publicity or promotion. He has worked from everyone from Margaret Atwood to Jimmy Palmiotti to even creators that are on the rise like Dave Baker. In this episode, we're going to get into a whole lot around comics promotion and publicity. We're going to get into what does real press look like right now today? Why is it that sometimes smaller outlets are actually a lot more effective than the larger mainstream outlets? How do you build momentum for a campaign in this day and age? And why is curiosity the single trait that he hires for? There's this story that he tells deep in the episode about David Foster Wallace that has completely reframed how I think about choosing clients and projects. So please do stick around for that. All right, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, David Hyde of Superfan Promotions. How you doing, David?
I'm good. I always have a little out-of-body experience. I love being the ghost in the machine. I love getting other people out there in the world and getting their art recognized on terms that they want it to be understood. But I myself am a very shy publicist, as many people who do marketing are, right? There's a few people who like to be front and center, but I definitely like to be behind the scenes.
It's interesting when you say that. If you don't mind, I'm going to dive straight in. One of the things that I've always been envious is not the right word. One of the things I've always noted about the way you run your company is that you brought up other publicists and other promoters inside of your company. And they all do such incredible work. Can you talk about what is that? I mean, how are you always looking out for the next person that's going to join the team? Is this like when you need somebody, you go out and look? How does that process work for you?
It's worked different every time.
Really?
First of all, I could not do this by myself at all. Second of all, I'm an older brother, so I'm really fond of giving advice. So bear with me, listeners. But work with the best, right? Like if you work with the best people, it'll be a really rewarding thing. So the first person who I brought onto the team in a significant way was Pamela Mullen-Horvath, who I had worked with previously at DC, and I had worked with her before I was at DC at Penguin Random House when we were at sister divisions, one floor away.
Right.
And so I knew that she was a comics curious person who understood like all of the really nitty gritty work that you have to do or had to do, especially at that time, to get significant national book coverage, right? Which is, very different than working with like the comic trade press or the blogosphere, whatever we're calling it on any given day. And so I was lucky in that she was at a moment where she was looking to make a life change. DC Entertainment had just relocated to the West Coast, and Pamela is from the East Coast and wanted to stay with her family. And so it was a natural opportunity to reconnect with her and make a continuation of really one of the great partnerships that I've been able to have, because she worked alongside me at DC for the bulk of my time there. And again, we did overlap working together at Random House. So, it's not been a significant of our professional careers working together. So that was a really easy addition. Sometimes you just get lucky. Hannah Behedry has been working at Superfan for over 5 years, and she was an assistant over at Hill Nadell, which is the literary agency here in LA, where my wife works. And my wife thought really highly of her, and Hannah was looking to do something new. And we just hit it off at an event. She wasn't trying to get into the PR game, God help her, or anyone who does. And it was just a natural connection of two people. And really, like, when you are putting together your team, you really just want to think about, like, who do you want to spend the time with, right? Whether you're or you're running your own company, you just spend a lot of time under largely fairly stressful conditions. I mean, within the major caveat that like nobody is going to die if we mess up our job, but it's a lot of intense, really quick turnarounds, and then having to try to do everybody's job for them in a certain way, or make it easier for them to do their job. But we'll get back to that. And then Dustin Holland used to work at CBR, and he manifested his job. He tracked down Pamela and myself. All three of us really liked working with him. And he tracked Pamela and myself down in Artist Alley and said, hey, if you guys ever need like a new person on the team, I'd love to work with you. And then there was some restructuring at CBR, and I immediately reached out, and he joined the company, I think, the next week.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we also have like the world's greatest intern, whose name I won't say at this time. He's in between interns. But again, that was somebody sort of manifesting the job. He was recommended by Kelly Sudikonik, who, if Kelly Sudikonik recommends somebody, you take that very seriously.
You take that seriously,
yeah. And so it was my great pleasure to send her a note a few weeks into the internship. It's like, I just need to thank you for like recommending the best intern I've ever worked with, either at Superfan or at DC or at Random House. So that's a lot of interns, and he's been pretty spectacular. But there's so much teamwork, right? And one of my clients, who will go unnamed, recently had a retreat, and something that they said like really resonated with me, which is that like comics, largely speaking, are a team sport, right? And not everybody understands the value of that statement, at least initially. I think the people who really get it and are going to make a career out of their passion learn that, right? Like, it obviously all starts with the creator, but very few people can do every part of the process by yourself. And so then you need to surround yourself with people who like share your passion and then are as excited about what you're going to do together day in and day out, right? Because like editorials in there doing all of the work with the creator, right? And then their
Yeah.
job is to, as soon as they can, get it over to publicity and to marketing. And, you know, they feed us. We are the vampires in the process, right?
Right.
And then our job, right, is to then make all of the hard work that we do together manifest itself into sales, which then continues the cycle back to editorial, because the sales then allow for the next level of acquisition, right? So I love that I'm working for a company that sort of recognizes that, because a lot of times publicity and marketing are kind of a little bit of the red-haired stepchild in comics, right?
True.
Or like seen, you know, very suspiciously. And I think that, one, that's because there's so many really great movies about really terrible publicists written by really angry writers, right? And also, you know,
Sure.
there's also probably a well-deserved representational issue for people who do publicity historically. But when somebody new joins the team, what I always try to impart to them is that, like, we cannot lie, right? Because everybody sort of assumes that a publicist is lying. So you have to be aware of, like, office politics, creative egos, everything else.
So it's interesting that you talk about that team dynamic, and you talk about the place that PR comes in. And there's so much you just said that I would like to dovetail back into. But in thinking about, like, those interns, and I want to say, for the record, Kelly Sue, if you're listening to this, feel free to send me interns, because apparently you are the intern whisperer. What is there, like, a commonality of what you need when you're training someone on PR in our space? Is there something that you often have to go back to? I mean, I know I have 5 or 10 lessons I make sure every employee that comes into our team needs to learn. I'm curious to know, what are those for you?
That's such a great question. I'm pausing because the question sort of makes me have to sort of talk about the old world and the new world, right?
Yeah.
And,
okay,
and
great.
what I mean by that is there have been so many disruptions to the comic space, to the social media landscape, to how we discover news in the last 5 years, that I find, in this time at least, there is more need to remind not just the people who work with me on the Superfan team, who are pretty great, but also everybody that we're partnering with, about, like,
Right.
sort of why is that we're doing what we're doing, right? So there's like larger lessons that or recommendations that I make when somebody joins the team, or whether it's an intern or, you know, junior level person. But this time is so wild. The ways in which we communicate are so wild. It is hard to even put into writing what best practices are in late 2025 that will be valuable in early 2026. Right? Like, you know, so we're recording this, and it'll air in a couple of weeks. And I would like to hope that is largely the same world that we live in today.
Hopefully.
But it probably won't be.
Yeah.
And in ways that we can't anticipate right now. And I've been doing this for quite a while, and I'm largely pretty good at anticipating trends or just recognizing things that are coming. But the rapid level of change and instability for everything in the worlds that we live in, and for this entire industry, make it harder to anticipate things, because you're mostly just trying to get everybody aligned on, like, key dates that have value, and reminding them what the value is. And so, like, by way of saying, when I launched this company, 12 years ago, there was one distributor.
Yeah.
There you had like one FOC date. You had
Yep.
multiple publishers out there doing things slightly differently, but there was an understanding of certain common expectations. Like if you have a major book or comic to announce, you announce it in the biggest possible place that you can. I set up a business that I thought would give me the runway that myself and then the team would need in terms of how many weeks to execute a meaningful PR campaign, knowing that you want to dial things up around final order cutoff, right?
Right.
But in the crazy world that we live in, almost every assumption that one could make, you have to now currently question, right? Like, if you're a publisher, should this be a periodical or a graphic novel? That issue has been there really the entirety of my career.
Right.
Would it be a Kickstarter? Should we put it out online for free to read before we go to market with it? Everything's at play in a different way. What is a meaningful press hit today is very different than what it was when I launched the company, right? Like I had a vision for, okay, great. There's a bunch of creator owned projects out there that the people who are working on them might want extra resources in addition to whatever fine help they're receiving from their publisher. And my assumption at that time is like that was pretty much my business model, right? And
right,
it has changed over time with opportunity and connections and whatnot. But it's also it evolves as soon as the pandemic happens, and at that time, Superfan was booked like 6 to 9 months in advance, and then you have no distribution. And then people are reaching out and like, hey, I'm launching a Kickstarter on Monday. Can you do it? and I say yes, because like it's a great privilege to have your business like booked out months in advance. And then with everything changing the road, you're like, yeah, I got to go. Like, got to just figure out a way to bend time and space and have a team that is as flexible as we've had to become to make those opportunities happen. Jimmy Palmiotti was the first creator to hire me to work on a crowdfunding campaign. And I learned a tremendous amount from him. And then we learned things together on that first campaign. Like I had, sometimes your what you think is going to be a great idea ends up being like the worst possible idea. So I was like, Jimmy, let's have a single, a unique press hit every day of the campaign. You know what that is? That is exhausting.
30 days.
30 day, and that's when people were doing 30-day campaigns.
Oof.
And so we learned a lot. Like we got like national press in week 2, and you know what? It did not matter, right? It did not move the needle. And so then we realized, okay, great. Like this model doesn't work. Gotta do something different. But once COVID happens and coinciding with that, like social media is imploding. Discoverability for search words is changing under the hood, just in terms of how people are gonna, find out about a new comic or a new crowdfunding campaign. All of these things happening simultaneously just makes you have to question every single assumption. So
sure.
All wishes to say, I have not answered your actual questions. I'm going to take a swing at that, which is I largely hire like intangibles, right? So when I was at DC and I was lucky enough to persuade Pamela to take a big jump and join me at DC Comics, I knew that like I was hiring somebody with a tremendous work ethic, who was really curious, who had worked with, she'd worked out with Alex Ross on Mythology at Pantheon, And she had enough exposure to comics and graphic novels. But what I cared about was her Rolodex in her mind of book contacts, but largely just that I knew the challenges of bringing somebody from the traditional book world into the comics world. And so I needed somebody who, and I say this with all affection, if Pamela is listening, who would be like as stubborn as I am, right? To understand that, like, you know what you're doing, people are going to question you because it's largely, we're going to bring a different approach, right? And so every time I just want to bring in curious people and people who read and who are excited about reading. Is like, that is my...
Oh yeah,
books are my love language for, you know, everybody who's not turned off the video of us. You know, can see all of the books behind. I clearly have a book problem. But it, you know, books to me are just, they are full of magic, and they are the things that make you want to work as hard as you do, right? Like, my favorite thing to do is just to sit in the backyard and read. And not that everybody who works with me needs to have that same thing, but just that commitment to reading. Because I do think that, especially right now, we're seeing probably the biggest split of my lifetime between readers and non-readers. And I feel like it is harder to bridge that gap than ever before. And that is largely sort of what we're setting out to do each and every day, right? So, like, how do you write a press release? How do you write a headline that will captivate people? That is clearly like a fundamental part of what we do. But you have to bake into the equation that even if you are working on a graphic novel adaptation of a really popular video game, most gamers don't read. Most people don't read. And so how do we, like, invite them into the tent so that we bring in the next generation of readers?
I swear that you have, just in the, 20 minutes or so we're talking, I think I've got another hour's worth of questions just based on what you've just said. Normally, this is where I pivot and start talking about your previous work, but I'm so fascinated by hearing you talk about where we are currently that I want to stay here as long as we can. You said earlier that having a press hit is different today than it's ever been. Can you talk about what does a press hit look like in 2025, in late 2025?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I want to say the press environment is challenging.
Challenging, yeah.
But also at the same time is healthier than people might say that it is.
That is so antithetical to how, I mean, it's been such a, like, I had an entire series where I talked to a bunch of journalistic folks and said, who killed comics journalism? Hearing you say that it's healthier than it's ever been is a surprise. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think part of it is that, like, we're all creatures of habit. I'm probably going to get in tons of trouble for all of this, but
good.
But here's how I feel about it. Truly, is that I should say, I have a great fondness for, like, legacy media, right? Like, again, going back to my days in traditional book publishing, like, being in the New York Times or on NPR sold books when I was at Knopf and Vintage and Anchor Books, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a really dynamic moment to be what felt like at the end of sort of like legacy publishing. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I joined the comic industry, what I wanted to do as a lifelong comics fan was, like, be respectful of the comics culture, but then also figure out how and when do you lean into making a New York Times announcement versus a Wizard magazine announcement without disrupting relationships or making too many people angry at you. And at that time, like, listeners who've been in the industry or fans of the industry for a while will know, like, you know, Jonah Weiland at CBR was a force to be reckoned with.
an incredible relationship to have, right? It would be, if you had a relationship with Jonah, you could, you knew you were halfway there.
But also, then you have Matt Brady over at Newsarama. And those two were so, in the best ways, competitive with each other.
Yeah.
And if I had to identify, like, the two things that are missing the most today, is there are a lot of great outlets. There legitimately are. And they have really dynamic and engaged audiences in ways that we in comics take for granted sometimes.
Sure.
But you don't have that kind of like super competitive, ego-driven in a good way, right? Desire to be the best. Like people want to be the best in terms of putting out their best content. But like this was like the Red Sox versus Yankees level of like, you do this, we do this. You've got a column every Friday, we're doing a column on Thursday, right? and that level of competitiveness was really healthy for the industry, and that we really miss. But in a way that, obviously New York Times, George Gustina's, who does most of their comics coverage there, has done a tremendous job for decades. And I'm so pleased every time he gets back to us and says, my editor likes this story. The New York Times and NPR still matter, but there are also other places that matter in a significant way. And one of the reasons why I love working on crowdfunding campaigns is that you're able to see what is actually driving pledges versus what is a press hit that like you feel good about, right? Like my joke is like there are certain outlets I'm not going to name that are legacy national media places that like after a while I came to understand that it was like putting your test grades on the fridge. That was for your mom. Your mom doesn't need a visual like reminder necessarily that you got 10 out of 10 on your quiz, right? There are certain places, many of which are not currently involved in the space or don't exist anymore, that I realized that did not cause a spike on Amazon. They did not encourage people to go and pre-order it. That might still have value at that time, but it was not like a linchpin for a campaign. And I guess largely what I'm trying to say is that there are still multiple outlets that really matter that can be a significant linchpin. What you have to do to put together an entirely compelling overall promotional campaign is possibly more complex. Like I had goals for when I launched Superfan of like, hey, I'm doing 6-week PR campaigns, and at that time with the right creator who had the bandwidth and desire to do it, that meant like 4 or 5 weeks of 4 interviews each week. We don't run those kind of campaigns anymore because there are not 20 places doing interviews. Right. So that part is absolutely true, that this is a challenging landscape. But I guess if there's one thing I would love people listening out there to sort of understand is that there are still really compelling press outlets that can really make a book matter. You just have to be extra thoughtful about when that press hit comes and then how you get the word out from there. Because, I've been doing this long enough that when I was at Random House, for example, we would make photocopies of all of the press coverage for an author and send it to them in the mail.
Sure.
So they would do interviews. They'd go on a book tour, which was a wildly outdated model at that time, but it could still be very successful, especially with the caliber of authors published by Vintage and Anchor. But once they did their interview, they were done, right? And now that is step one, right? And you need to have those secondary ways of amplifying what it is that you do. When if you say you break a story with IGN, that's great. That's amazing. How are you going to, and why does that matter? That matters because they have a wide readership and a dedicated comics vertical and an engaged audience that will go and back a Kickstarter or pre-order a book after their coverage is there. But your job as a publicist and also as a creator is not done once that IGN story runs. It is what you do after that moment that largely is going to impact whether or not your book or your project takes off. And sometimes it's out of your control, but you still have to have all those levers and be ready to pull them.
Right. Well, I don't want you to give away any of the real proprietary secrets of Superfan, but what are what are some of the more surprising outlets that you can get a hit that will actually affect sales? Because one of the things that I can say is I came from a place of I was never from PR, right? That's never been my my launching spot, but our company does quite a bit of PR for people. And I will say the challenge is always, where can you get attention that actually does affect, numbers? And you talking about that is something that speaks directly to me. Is there any surprising outlets that you found?
One of the things that surprises me, and again, I'll go back to working on crowdfunding campaigns, because it really is. Now, maybe it's only true of crowdfunding campaigns, but there are certain comic outlets that I'm not going to name that are not legacy outlets, and not necessarily ones that I see people place coverage with all the time, and they will show up. For those of you who don't know, when you work on a Kickstarter, you get access to the dashboard, and I ask all of my clients to give me and the team access to the dashboard so we can see what's working and what's not working. And there are certain places that will surprise me when they show up there. And so I guess in a long-winded way, I will dodge your question slightly. But I will say that one of the things that really horrified me when I was working at a large corporate publisher was talking to some of the smarter writers in the industry who spoke about the comics internet like it was a monolith. I talked to this one outlet, and so I'm good. It's like, okay, that is not how this works. I mean, it was never how it works, but it's really not how it works now, right? So, again, I came out of traditional book publishing and Knopf, for those who don't know. I was in the Knopf group, which is Vintage and Anchor Books and Pantheon, and they were the very, very best, on every level. And so it was tremendously exciting and engaging to be there. That Paul Bogarts, who used to run the Knopf publicity department, had in a different press time. It was like the rule of three. If you got 3 national press hits, you were good to go and you're on your way to being a national bestseller, right? But now, because of it is possible that you could do a blockbuster, 6 or 7 figure Kickstarter campaign through 3 PR hits. But there are so many other things that need to be baked into that equation because there are so many more distractions in our day, right?
Yeah.
And all of your audiences have split. So it was never true that you did an interview with Jonah at CBR that everybody in comics had seen it. No.
Done.
CBR and Newsarama had wildly different audiences. CBR and Jonah were much more aligned with Marvel's publishing program for relationship reasons, and Newsarama and Matt Brady were more aligned with DC. So that was one part of it. But also each website, the best of the websites or the best of podcasts in this environment, they all have their own audience of people who are loyal, who are excited to hear like, oh, I want to know what Dave Brook at AIPT thinks about this comic, or I want to know what Zach at Comics Beat says in his review of this comic. And it is not all the same. You have to probably work 10 times harder to get the word out. So just to go back from like 3 questions ago, I think this is a very challenging, press landscape because you have to really be rigorous. But I guess I think that the reality is you always had to be rigorous.
Yeah.
You just didn't think about it in the same way. And also what is challenging about this time is, okay, you're doing everything right, and then there will be that last curveball that potentially undoes all of the work you did, right? So the pub date shifts, or the books are on the dock, right? And they're not getting into the hands of people. Or the outlet that normally supports on social media did not share on social media, right? So like why does mainstream press matter? It's because you have a chance to bring in people who don't normally read comics, right? Like that was the assumption. And there, one of the assumptions I had to respectfully challenge when I first joined the industry was that people wanted to, like at DC, you had your comic trade press publicity team and you had your mainstream. I was like, well, why are they separate? Like at that time, Hyde McDonald was running Comics Beat, but she was also at Publishers Weekly. So it's like when I'm calling Heidi, what hat am I asking her to put on? And realistically, what you want to be doing is shaping a message that's going to appeal not to like everybody, but is consistent to your respectful and potential audiences. Does that make sense?
Totally. That completely makes sense.
And by the way, I'm now so used to doing the Superfan podcast where we're always very mindful of making sure that the guest gets to say the most and that we're not stepping on them or stepping on each other. It's been I'm out of practice interviewed by myself. So by all means, throw me a life raft when I need one.
No problem at all. I will say that so much of what you're saying completely jives with what I've been feeling. One of the things I tell clients is do everything possible, right? I will say that we've had clients that have done an incredibly huge success and ones that not so much. And the ones that not so much often are the ones that are saying, that channel doesn't really have much of an audience. I think I'm not going to waste my time there. And my answer to them is we have to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Like we need to be everywhere that we can be. And I understand you have to be careful with your time, but also in this day and age, there isn't a monolith that we can get a huge interview with and that's it. There's, all done. I get to go create. You really have to be building always. You have to constantly be building and putting your face out there and your message and getting that product out there. So what you're saying jives with me. And so if I'm quiet, it's because I just want to make sure that I don't, I want to be able to show I can sample what you're doing for a short later. So.
I love what you just said. It took me 5 minutes to say much more succinctly though, right? One of the things that we try to, when we start working with a creator or a company for the first time, right? And in the kickoff call, there's a few things that I say to the new client, and one is to don't think of what it is that we are doing together as doing marketing, and that is because marketing and publicizing yourself is really hard. I think, right? What we're trying to do as marketing people, as publicity people, is to start as many conversations with other people as you can. And if you start 100 conversations and 20 of them are meaningful, then you've done a great job. But I need new clients, new publishers to tell me what is their actual bandwidth. Like, for instance, I was once lucky enough to work with Margaret Atwood with Dark Horse, right? And Margaret was very generous and said she would do 3 interviews. Just, okay, great. Legendary writer. Also,
sure.
If you think working with Margaret Atwood would be amazing, reader, you are right. Margaret was one of the most rewarding people that I've ever had a chance to work with. But you know what else, Adam? She was possibly the hardest working person that I ever worked with. Because after I booked the first 3 interviews and we'd worked together a couple of weeks, she wrote back and said, okay, you know what you're doing. Whatever you need, I will do. And I will let you know before I run out of time.
Oh, damn.
Right? And so
that's got to be the best day, right?
That allowed me to be very strategic initially and then to broaden that conversation. And then we were everywhere. But it takes that trust. And also, like, this is hard. Like, publishing is hard. Comics is hard. And you need to sort of recognize that. You need to build into whatever it is that you are doing creatively the time to go out there and promote it effectively. And to try not... If you're going to turn something down, really make sure that you've done 50 interviews beforehand and you have a real reason to turn something down, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the surprise. You don't know which smaller outlet is going to run the smartest of the headlines in this press environment and get picked up, or post their story on X and Blue Sky and Instagram on the right day, and that is the one that drives it. So I know from what the Superfan team does, what is realistically going to drive the most attention, but I am still surprised by the things that, okay, great, that one didn't necessarily land for me, but it's the value of doing the work with people who are curious and are willing to honor their commitments in terms of the amount of press they'll do.
I love that you keep coming back to curiosity. It really is the superpower, right? It's the thing that just you notice curiosity, that everything else can be fixed. Right? Once you have it, it's it. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of curiosity and doing things new, I don't want to dig too deep into this interview without getting to something super exciting for you. I spent the last couple days digging deep into the Superfan podcast. What makes you want to go into being press after all these years of reaching out to press? Like, where did that come from?
Great question. For those of you who have not had a chance to listen to the Superfan podcast, it is not too late. We've just wrapped season 1. I am joined by my co-host Christian Gossett, who is an artist, who's also the person that designed what became the Darth Maul lightsaber. And wow. Chris Simon, who is an executive editor over at Mad Cave. And we ended up, this was not a real strategic act on our parts, to be honest with you. Couple of years back, because everything takes way longer than you think it would.
Sure.
We were celebrating a milestone birthday for Chris. And she wanted to do something new and different. She had done a podcast before, and she was trying to figure out who would be a good co-host. And I recommended Christian Gossett, who she knew better than I did, who I was just meeting, but I liked their rapport. And initially, the idea was that I was going to be like way more behind the scenes, like I am all the time.
Sure.
And I don't. We at the Hyde House are big fans of Dinner Time Live with Dave Chang. and he is like one of the producers is sort of like the voice of the internet. And initially, I thought I was going to be the voice of the internet, like off camera, jumping in with like a snide joke, maybe a cocktail recipe paired with the conversation. But like largely, I would not be. I would certainly not be a co-host. And then things just evolved towards that. I think for me, the grind of doing comics PR or PR in general or work in 2024, 2025, right? Because this is in no way unique to me, but like I just needed to do something different. And I tend to have lots of creative ideas, and publicity, you get to be creative in all sorts of ways, but you kind of tuck it away a little. Do you know what I mean? Like our job is to generate ideas for people to come in and yes and, whether that is the creator or the press outlet. And what I realized is that I wanted to like dive into the process with Chris in a different way. So we ended up recording 6 episodes for season 1, talking with people who make the comics we love about the things that they love that are not comics. And so it was not, sometimes people will sort of make assumptions like, oh, you're doing this because like you think this is where it's headed. It's like, okay, well, it took us 2 years to pull it together. And it's actually kind of a lot like the best advice I hear comic creators give to aspiring creators, which is just go make something. And I was feeling with the frustrations of these times, I just had to get out there and make something with 2 people who I enjoy spending time with, right? And I've learned a ton doing it, and not necessarily like the lessons I thought I would learn, right? And some of them are sure like so obvious. I knew them, but I wasn't really feeling them anymore. Okay, so
right.
We got some great advice from various people, including the great cartoonist Davey Baker, who did Mary Tyler Moorhawk for IDW.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. He was one of my few creator interviews for this series. Most of the time, it's people behind the scenes, but I made sure that Dave was in my first probably like 20 or so, just because he's such. You talk about a creative mind. He's just his mind is all over the place, and he loves this material so much, and he's just so, I don't know. I love that guy, especially when he and I disagree. I love arguing with him so much.
I love working with him because for lots of reasons, but one, he is very process oriented and like and really excited by the process, but also like. When I first launched the company, people would come up and say like, "Who's your dream client?" And then they would reference somebody who maybe had like a popular adaptation of their body of work. I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, sure, that could be good, but mostly I just want to have lots of different kinds of clients who are at different points in their careers who are excited to do this. And like, I did not know Davey when he reached out to me. And so you never know what it's going to be like. I read the book, I see if I have a vision for it, and then, we'll do like a follow-up meeting. And I'd be like, okay, great. Here, do you think you could write like these 4 essays? And like the next day I woke up and I had 4 essays in my inbox. Right. And so like that level of commitment of like, okay, great. Did I hit my marks? Is this the kind of thing that you're looking for? Was super rewarding. Gosh, how did we get to Dave Baker? You might have to call all that.
We were talking about the podcast, but one of my questions was, how do you choose clients? But yeah, he gave you some piece of advice. I want to come back to choosing clients, his advice.
Thank you. I think even I have rambled too much on that one, but make sure that you have enough like in the bag, right? So it's like what are the lessons you already know, but you forget because of the times that we live in. When I started in comics, nobody was doing it anymore, but people would reference having 3 issues in the drawer, right?
Yeah.
And we went from that to we're going to rush solicit this out because we need to, because the creators are excited right now was a big reason why you would do that, right?
Yeah.
And you wanted to keep their attention. You wanted to move while the idea was hot. And people started launching solicits before they had any material done. Anyhow, so he reminded us, like, have 6 done. And then as we, it took us quite a while to get going. And I realized, okay, we're going to have to do seasons. Like, we're really busy people, right?
Yeah.
Like, Gossett is, always working on, big media properties sometimes, which he can't, talk about at all or not for, a couple of years. And then Chris Simon obviously has got a full-time job as an executive editor. It's like, we cannot do something every week. And it gave me so much more appreciation for the people that I work with week in, week out, that frankly, I was already impressed a lot by, and would often write back, like, we always write back, thank you, and really mean it. But in the grind to make 6 hopefully quality episodes, I'm like, holy, how does Comic Book Club Counseling nail it every time?
Every time,
yeah. Level of content out there. How does Barbara Dillon at Fanbase Press raise 2 adorable twin girls, have a day job, and have this level of content up on the site every day? Right? Those are things that, like, were already impressive to me in a meaningful way. But then, like, my head exploded, right? Because I was like, okay, we're gonna take like a 3-month hiatus from recording. So we are actively recording season 2 currently, and we are lucky to have a great editor. Bryant Dillon of Fanbase Press was the editor for both season 1 and will be again for season 2. But it's a lot of work if you want to do something and make it matter in this day and age. I've got to make the same commitment that I want the people who I'm working with and with my actual job, to get out there. And then, of course, the other thing I relearned is just how hard it is to promote yourself. Like, I'm much happier talking about Christian Gossett's been doing these amazing portraits of the guests for each episode. And then he started doing a portrait of the guest with either the person that we're talking about or a representation of their topic in some way, right? And so that is fun for me to go out there and talk about, like, oh, wow, he's got these great illustrations inspired by Shag, who is this California-based fine artist and painter who I'm obsessed with. And so Gossett just kind of riffed on that style. It came up with a new style that was the kind of mid-century cool that we were aspiring for. Talking about how great he is, I can do that all day long. He's a brilliant guy, really smart, really curious person. All the work that Chris Simon has done on it, phenomenal. She created the website and runs the Substack and just brings a great, unique point of view, and dessert recipes for every episode of the podcast. I don't want to get out there and talk about myself. I'm like, okay, I think we're out of time here, right? It's just, it's awkward and weird. And I will say what's great about comics, again, it's a team sport. So most of the time the writer gets to go out there. We always remind every writer, talk about your co-creators, every single one of them, because the artists, sometimes they're shy, but mostly they're on deadline. They're always drawing to make the schedule. And so you've got to go and be their champion, which honestly is easier for most people than going and championing themselves. So
I feel that so deeply. When we first started this podcast, I've talked about it several times that I was kind of tricked into being the face, because while it is in much like, Superfan was your company, Prana is mine, but I wanted so desperately to not just be the only voice. And I thought I had a team with me that we were going to like team interview, and then they all just went, no, oh, it's you, and it was, I still to this day feel a little bit of resentment because, it is so difficult to promote yourself. It's so much easier to spend that effort being a good host, right? Saying, you need to talk to this person's amazing. Look at this person. And that's, I think that if there's any consolation, it's that this, for me anyway, this project has been about, look at how amazing David Hyde is, right? That's so much easier than saying, look how amazing Adam Freeman is. So I definitely feel you so much. One of the things that you said in doing the research, I found this quote where you said, making sure your ambition to create something exciting does not outstrip your preparation for it. Boy, oh boy, I think that's going up on my wall. That is like one of those pieces that's just so hard to remember because, like you said, the creative juice gets flowing and you want to talk about it immediately. You want to keep that excitement going. Oh, such a challenge. Especially in this day and age where you're now like working as, I guess, essentially a contractor. That's got to be a challenge, right? When you're dealing with a client that isn't prepared, right? How do you deal with that?
And people will not be prepared in different ways, right? Like one of the things that I learned a while, like pre-pandemic, but in a Charlie Brown going for the football kind of way, you're always surprised by, is that even if you work with somebody once and it is the best experience, it's not necessarily going to be the same experience or as fulfilling the second time around because all the variables change. Well, Adam, I have a question for you.
Oh, good.
What is the lesson you were most surprised by in terms of doing this podcast? What were you shocked by?
I would say I've learned something from every single guest. And that's part of what drives me to do it. You talk about the challenge of doing something like this while also keeping, we have a handful of clients that we deal with on a daily basis, and trying to get this out every week has been a struggle. There was a period where we took a month off and it killed me because I knew that the audience you build out of repetition. But I think that was it really was the need to show up, right? Just the act of showing up every single time, even when you don't want to. Seth Godin talks about how the mark of a professional is when they're there when they don't feel it, right? You don't want your surgeon showing up and saying, yeah, I'm just not feeling your bypass today. You want him to just do the bypass, even though he's had a fight with his wife that morning. Right. I would say that has really been the biggest lesson for me in this project, and then adding on other weekly, content creation just sounds so, antiseptic, but is just that need to constantly be creating something and to giving, right? Using this as a platform for other people's learning has been huge. For me and for my company, it's been enormous. I hope you see the same out of Superfan. Although every time I come to you with a client who's like, I want PR, you go, oh, we're 6 months out. I'm like, okay, you're doing fine. Yeah.
What do you think in terms of the listenership for your podcast? What do you think drives the most listens? Like, do you feel like you have a regular listenership? Do you feel like each one is a one-off beast in terms of like how much your guest promotes it?
Yeah, I would say that we do have a regular listenership. I only know because I talk to them like at live events, right? When we go to conventions or something, I'm always meeting somebody who says, I've listened to everyone. And that always feels amazing because we have, a hit episode for us reaches 1,000 people, And in this day and age, 1,000 people is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. But I said to our team when we started this, if we reach the right 200 people, that's all I'm looking for. It's just the right 200. And I would say that it shifts depending on who the interviewee is. But because, they promote it and that they bring their own audience, and it does shift some, and hopefully we pick up one or two of those. But I try not to think too much about who the audience is. Like, this conversation is the questions I've always wanted to ask you. Right. It's that finally getting a dinner where you get to sit down with somebody and you just get to, you talk to them and they talk to you and you both walk away from it having learned something. That's just it. It's just an excuse for that dinner over and over again. So, yeah, the only audience I'm really worried about is me. That's helpful. Yeah.
How obsessed with the analytics? Are you so far into the podcast that you don't check under the hood, right? Like, as I was asking this question, I clicked refresh to see how many more people listened to last week's episode of the podcast, because this one has some traction, right? Like, you know, each one, has found a different audience, but what we're doing is very unique in terms of, I don't know necessarily how many people are going to always listen. I mean, that would be, other than my mom. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for listening to every episode.
I don't know that my mom's gotten through one.
Again, in terms of like the under the hood decisions about like this press environment versus and this social media moment, I will say that the season 1 of the podcast ends with truly all 6 conversations were great. And then the last one is with Patrick McDonnell, the cartoonist of Mutts, which has been around for decades, and he's a national institution, and he is just added to the Harvey Award Hall of Fame, which was really exciting to be there with him for that night. But he also has a massive email list, and so when his team included a link to the podcast in the email blast that went out yesterday for their October newsletter, as the marketing person, I was incredibly excited about that, because I could see right now, at this day and age, if you have a Substack or if you have a newsletter that is out there, that is likely the best way for people to discover whatever it is that you want to say.
To answer your question, I try and I go through seasons. Right, we've been doing this now. There've been about this might be number 90 or so of these that we've done. I go through periods where I look at the analytics on a almost daily basis, just trying to understand what it is they're saying. The numbers are so small that it's really difficult to make a decision based on them. I look more at how long am I holding people? I try to be conscious about what we're talking about up front to keep them moving. And I will say that the biggest lesson I've learned is how to title the episode. The title makes a big difference. And when we are done with this, I'm going to go back in and re-record an introduction that is going to be based on what you and I talked about. And it's very specifically designed to say, who you are, why you are important, what we talked about, and why someone should continue listening to the end. And those hitting those beats in a specific way is something that I spend a lot of time on every episode, just because it's these are 2-hour conversations. The narrowest of audiences is going to listen to the full 2 hours. And I want to make sure that if you are somebody who will get something out of it, that you don't just click out of it because we spent the first 10 minutes just getting to know each other, right? And that's the real challenge of these interviews, is saying, is getting you to be comfortable enough that you can talk about those things at the end while also letting the audience know that it's going to be worth their while to hang on to the end. And man, that's the real art of this that I still have not. I'm not even close to understanding completely, but it's a worthy goal, you know. So
yeah, it's funny because a lot of the decisions that we make are much more as enthusiasts than as anything else. Like they're again, people make an assumption that because I do marketing or publicity, or like because it's the Superfan podcast, that it is like overtly promotional in a certain way. That is not. Like it actually took us for better or worse, weeks to come up with the fact that we were going to call it the Superfan Podcast, because we figured out what it was that we wanted to do. We knew that it was a really crowded marketplace. There's so many great podcasts out there that if we were going to do something, we needed to have a unique style for it, right? So we spent a full year just talking about stuff that I don't know if anybody other than my wife will totally even like see, right? Like stuff around the margins. So the idea of coming up with cocktail and mocktail and dessert recipes, you know, like that was several months into it. And it was because we really wanted it to feel like a party. And it was because we were having 4 voices. And at this time in the world, I think getting people to share their enthusiasm in a long form way is incredibly impactful. It is a really fun thing to see people open up, people who are asked the same questions over and over again, to be asked about something that they don't have to fall back into their rhythm of how to answer a question, or here's a question that they've answered 25 times because no one's ever asked Patrick about Frank Zappa. And not to ruin that particular episode, but 40 minutes into it, he's like, okay, I'm all Zappa'd out. So you thought, okay, wow, that was an amazing and abrupt end to the interview, but it was so good. Yeah. He's like, let's talk about the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And the music of the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And so then we just went off script for 25 minutes because he was just excited. We got his brain thinking about music. And as a former musician, how music and cartooning and the acts of creation are entwined. And what's been really amazing in ways that we probably should have predicted but didn't is how much the thing that people are a fan of has influenced their work.
Yeah.
Without them necessarily being aware that it would. I think, some people know right away. Mark Guggenheim told us right away, yes, I'm talking about Billy Joel. I'm obsessed with Billy Joel. I'm always happy to talk about Billy Joel. Kelly Sue DeConnick took several weeks, sent a number of all very exciting different topics. And then as we're talking to her, I think we discover this in the actual interview. Maybe, no, I think it was in the back and forth after she decided that she would talk about Alan Alda. She then gave us a little bit more context that she has Alan Alda knuckle tattoos. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what? If you have the name of another human being, or your own, frankly, like as a knuckle tattoo, you know what you're obsessed with, right?
Yeah.
But I love that. Like, she needed that moment of reflection of what do I want to talk about for a full hour?
Well, and I think that was, for me, that was why this has kept my attention for, as I said, 90 episodes or whatever it is. And we have another probably 20 or 30 already planned, because for me, it's about the things that you know so well that you don't even think about why they're important anymore. You know, it's just, why would you want to know about that? I get that a lot. Why would you want to know about that? Why? Because, for those of us in the audience who are who want to be where you are or want to understand a little better what the work you do is, like knowing those things, those mechanical things, it can be the unlock. It has been for me. Many of our projects I never would have done except for this podcast, because I've learned so much of talking to the best about what it is that they do, that it was just a brain unlock. It was a thing that did it. And I wanted to use that opportunity, that segue, to go back to something you said earlier. You're talking about Dave Baker and his incredible Mary Tyler Moorcock book, which I have back here. And he talked about work. I think he talked about working with you during that episode where I interviewed him. You said you asked him to do 4 essays. This is something I don't think I've ever asked a client to do an essay for. I would love to hear about, like, what was it that made you do that? I mean, because you're in the process of trying to evaluate, do I want to work with this person, right? What made it was, and what were the subjects of those essays?
Oh, so once again, great questions. I have to admit, when I talk to people, I will break down a whole bunch of different tactics. So and kind of rank them. So in my opinion, the best publicity hit these days is an excerpt of the project. Okay, what is our goal? Our goal is to spread awareness about this thing that you've created and get people to read it. What is the best way to get people to read it? Is to get them to read some of it, and it's so good that they need to read more. Game, set, match, right?
Yeah.
Anything else is a step away. Like, our job is to get people to read this thing you've created. So an interview can be really selling, right? It's a lot of work, so it's less efficient. It's of less value to the press outlet these days because, unfortunately, people don't tend to read that many interviews. But if you do them selectively and you do them with outlets that you think you're going to get good questions for, absolutely worth your time. And if someone says they won't do interviews, like, you have to be Margaret Atwood. And also, like, I dropped the Margaret story, not to be a name dropping publicist, but because if Margaret Atwood can make time to do interviews, you can make time to do interviews. But then I like to do things on the fringes, right? So I am obsessed with Spotify playlists just as a person.
Okay.
And so, like, I make a seasonal playlist each and every year for all the major holidays. And I like getting people to, again, we're trying to get people to start conversations. One way to market your book is by not marketing it, right? And so not everybody wants to make a playlist about the themes of their book. Some people will make a theme list of the music that they listen to while making the book. And other people don't want to use Spotify or don't want to make a playlist.
Sure.
Most people aren't going to do essays. Essays are all of the work of an interview with less direction, right? But a certain kind of person and a certain kind of, like, process-driven person, like Dave Baker, is going to jump all over that and just look for prompts, right? And I won't turn down a client if they don't want to do essays, because they're not for everybody. It's extra credit. Same with the Spotify playlist or any other tactic like that. But what I do ask is, like, people are honest with me. I once worked with a client who I got his book reviewed in the New York Times, and book review, which doesn't happen that often for graphic novels, and had done a number of interviews. But our job as a publicist is to play like 8 games of chess at once. And Adam, if you tell me you're going to do something, then I'm taking you at your word, and I'm not going to try to activate that particular hit until you send me the thing that I think is the right. If we talked about something, I'm like, that would make for a great Entertainment Weekly piece.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold off pitching Entertainment Weekly till you send me the essay. And then 2 days before publication, he wrote, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm really not into essays." It's like, "Oh, you could have just told me." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyhow, so somebody like David is more. He's a great client because he's always just yes ending. Like, oh, okay, we're gonna go weird. Let's go weird and like this, right? So, and those are the most rewarding of the kind of campaigns to work on.
I love that. Is this you, by the way? Is this your profile here with the Frankenstein?
That is me.
Okay. All right. Blake, if you're seeing this, we got to remember to put this link into the show notes, because I'm going to dig into some of these playlists. This is wonderful. I thank you for that. That's wonderful. I have to apologize in advance to the clients that I'm now going to ask for essays. So you talked about like what brings you to a client. Let's say it's somebody new, somebody young, somebody who is pitching you. Maybe they do interesting work. What does a good superfan client look like? Great
question. Again, I'm always looking for something different. So, and intangibles, again, curiosity, and not to make this the Dave Baker episode, but I didn't know.
Why not?
I didn't know Dave when he reached out, right? And then, but he understood, like, his book had a high concept that was super pitchable, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's Johnny Quest by way of David Foster Wallace. Well, David Foster Wallace is why I have a career in publicity. Okay, I worked at the Tattered Cover Bookstore, got to follow Mr. David Foster Wallace around when he was there for his last book event for Infinite Jest, which was him talking to the Tattered Cover Book Club group, which was largely 60 to 70 to 80-year-old women.
Oh my God.
Which I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not the audience that he had in mind while working on Infinite Jest, if he had an audience in mind. So sure. I did not realize, as I was hanging out with him all day, that his publicist was like 3 feet behind me. Okay, so this will date the story wildly, but there was this magazine called Entertainment Weekly. It came out weekly in print. Ally McBeal was on the cover of the magazine, and I knew because I was a big fan of DFW, that he was a big fan. And I saw him eyeing it. I was like, "Do you want me to buy that for you?" He's like, "Yeah, but could you put it in a brown paper bag?" And anyhow, so we're just getting along. We're walking through. He's hand selling books to me, and at the end, his publicist comes up and says, "This is my last event at Little Brown. Have you ever thought about doing publicity? I start my new job at Vintage Books next week. They've just had a complete turnover of their team, and they needed a publicity assistant. You should apply for the job."
Whoa!
We were at Denver at the time at the Tattered Cover Bookstore. My wife is from Denver. She grew up in Denver. And 3 weeks later, we moved to New York City with our 2 cats and 3 bags, no furniture, no idea what we were doing.
Oh my God.
But it was just time to go. So David Foster Wallace, sorry, this is a long anecdote. This is also a special of the kind of content that does not make it into the Superfan podcast because we have a great editor. There are moments in your life where you get like signposts. When we moved to New York because of David Foster Wallace, largely, right? When we moved to Los Angeles, my wife was wrapping up her job at Grove Atlantic, and she was introduced to Bonnie Nadell, who is David Foster Wallace's literary agent, who was looking for a junior agent to come on and join the agency. So we were already out here, but our lives in LA are what they are, in large part because of David Foster Wallace. So when somebody comes in and name drops David Foster Wallace in an intelligent way and then does a book as good as Mary Tyler Moore Hawk, I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Sometimes I will take on a project because I don't know anything about it. And I will tell the client in that case, like, hey, you're going to have to do my research here. A lot of times, I've been doing this now for 12 years, and so we are lucky that like Pamela has been working with Alex Ross for like over a decade. So anytime Sal, who's his art dealer, has an idea, we're going to take that super seriously because we like working with him and his team. Right now, I'm wrapping up, although listeners will probably be able to do late pledges for it, a Kickstarter for a Gilmore Girls documentary. I
saw that. I'm such
not
a huge fan.
I've never watched an episode. Listeners are probably most familiar with Jim DeMonaco, who does Light Boss Expo. But he is producing this episode or that documentary. But there is two really talented co-directors, including his co-director from the Mignola documentary. So I knew that I really had a great working relationship with Jim and Kevin, and then have really enjoyed working with Megna, the co-director as well. But I said, listen, I don't know Gilmore Girls. Lucky for you, Hannah grew up a huge Gilmore Girls fan, so you're set there. But that's the fun of it, right? Is like, yes, we have a Rolodex, but then how do you find all of the people in the press who are going to be receptive to a pitch from somebody they don't work with, which is a lot harder in 2025 than at any other point.
So that was something I wanted to dig into. So we are all in this day and age. Like I said, I did an entire series of these interviews where I talked to Hyde and I talked to David Harper and a couple other people about what we were, coining the death of comics journalism. There was a moment where comics journalism was incredibly powerful and an important tool, and then it's just become that much harder to find your way and promote and sell inside of the environment as it is today. So I know that how much we work towards where is the underpriced attention? Where are the people that do have audiences that you can talk to about this project that you're being paid to talk about? How do you look for those places in 2025? I mean, it's going to be the same sort of, you're going to be always looking for something new going into 2026. What does it look like when you're evaluating who it is that you're going to lean into and try and get that attention from?
Great question. I will say that you could probably make a wonderful supercut of me just saying great question. It'll be a great question episode. We do have like a master list of pretty much every press outlet out there and their social media following and how many unique visitors they get a month. That said, almost everything that the bulk of the decisions that we make tend to be far more gut level, right? So like we'll talk about Gilmore Girls for a second. So, clearly this is a show with a, mass and rabid fan base. And it's an anniversary year. There's a lot of mainstream outlets that are going to be interested, right?
My 10-year-old just discovered Gilmore Girls and watches it religiously now.
I hope that you back the Kickstarter.
Of course. I'm a huge fan of Jim. We're huge fans of Gilmore Girls. It was the thing that his mom and I connected with when we first met. So yeah, 100%. If I haven't, then I'm immediately going to do it right after this because you need to see me on the list.
I love it. Exactly. I'll be scrolling right now. So then it comes to that was a moment where we definitely leaned into like the traditional legacy model, right?
Right.
So the Hollywood Reporter or the New York Times or NPR is not going to care about the majority of projects that we promote, right?
Right.
But if you have a film of this quality with the level of trailer that they had and knowing that they were like making a bunch of exclusive clips for us to give to press, if you have the opportunity to go to the Hollywood Reporter with a story about a documentary by two an award-winning producer and award-winning co-directors, you lean into the legacy model there and knowing that, okay, great, other press outlets will still pay attention to Hollywood Reporter, and you'll get organic secondary press pickup. And so then your job is to, while you are assuming that that's your game plan, that you then, if they pass, you have a meaningful secondary game plan. And if they say yes, what is your rollout for additional content and additional announcements to keep the attention, to keep the focus, to build the followers? You know, we've talked a lot about like broadly press, right? But like, I gave a shout out to Palmiotti before, in which like I nearly killed us both by doing 30 press hits in 30 days. And we did. Now, one, I've done over 100 campaigns, so I would never do that to a client again. I'm sorry, Jimmy. But also, the game changes all the time, right? Like, every project on Kickstarter used to be Beyonce, and it's like, okay, great, you didn't know this was coming, and here it is, back it now. And now it's how much attention do you get for a project ahead of launch to build your pre-launch numbers, and then what are you saving to get the word out there at launch, and then how are you going to amplify that to keep the story going? And that's the part of it that like I love. It's a lot of knowing what people will be excited about. And by people, I mean the journalists that you're pitching. It is who cares about what kind of exclusive, what will be a non-starter, and then what you think can be like a meaningful moment when the project itself goes live, right? So like you've got it, even if you feel great because you got Hollywood Reporter, and then we're off to the races with all these other press outlets picking up Hollywood Reporter, but not necessarily linking to the Kickstarter. So it's like, how do you build on the momentum so that it feels like an actual event when you launch? So all of that is baked into the thinking, but it's probably less data driven and more instinctual. Just that tends to be how I think.
I want to, we're coming in on the end of our time. I'm starting to see the close of this, and so you were asking earlier about how I think about the structure and the analytics and those sorts of things. One of the things I like to do is to keep a couple really juicy questions towards the end. I see over your left shoulder some books that I'm a huge fan of personally. Dave Sim's Cerebus, an incredible piece of work. 300 monthly issues. We've never seen the like. Especially some of those moments are brilliant. Dave has since had, let's just say that his social equity kind of dropped. Let's put it that way, right? He would be a challenge to put out something mainstream for Dave Sim in this day and age. One of the problems I've thought about as a marketer, I don't think of myself as a publicist in the same way that you are, but I do think about these kinds of things, is how do you take somebody who does high quality work, but maybe has had some challenges either politically or socially or those sorts of things. When you're dealing with a client like that, would you take a client like that as one? And two, if you did, how would you begin presenting them to a public that is immediately going to put a barrier up?
It is hard enough to get a reading audience interested in a new book by the most likable, non-threatening, well-intended human being. And in this particular moment in humanity, I don't know how viable it is to go wildly against the grain.
No, that's fair. That's totally fair. And I think that the choosing of clients is its own strategic. It's its own strategy in building your own ability to do the work, right? If you get a reputation as somebody who's going to bring challenging subjects, you may not be the one who's going to get the answer when you try and call for somebody who isn't. I totally understand that.
But it's also that like every part of this world right now is challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so if you walk in and you know that there's already a negative track history, and again, I want to shift it a little only because I don't want people to like. I clearly have great respect for the best of Cerebus, which I've never finished reading, I will admit.
No?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because he clearly, in my estimation, he has a break at a certain
shift.
point. Right. He has and that shift impacts how he sees other people and also how he makes his art. Even when you are working with dynamic, hard-working people who put out a top-level publication in 2025, it is still hard. And you need to sort of acknowledge that, not in like an Eeyore way. It's just like, it is like life is hard. Yeah. We just have to sort of acknowledge that. And I don't say that as an excuse, right? But breaking into comics or publishing is hard. You know what else is hard? Being successful in comics or publishing. It is all hard. I don't know if you saw the new Spike Lee movie, Highest to Lowest, which is a remake of Kurosawa. But the speech, I don't want to spoil this movie, but there's a speech that Denzel Washington's character gives at the very end of the movie to a new artist. And it resonated with me, and my wife is a literary agent, and his speech is so profound for people who work behind the scenes because he's asking for the commitment from a really talented young woman to put in the work creatively, but then to work alongside him and continue to put in every part of the work in the years to come. And that is hard to do, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of like, I do publicity, but you can't like buy into your own hype. You can't like buy into the headline. You have to just understand that getting to work in this industry, first of all, 99% of the people in it, I hope 90, maybe 80 these days, love what they do. Because if you didn't love this, why would you live this life? Yeah. Right? Like it's a hard life. And then also to find some joy in that struggle, right? Like when people pass on like an exclusive pitch, I will write back like, thank you for letting me know a publicist's second favorite word after yes is no, because it gives me clarity about what the challenge is. We're not going to work together on this one. It doesn't work for you. That's fine. It allows me and the team to like kind of come up with something else that might work. And sometimes you work on that big story and it's Hollywood Reporter breaking Gilmore Girls, or you get like New York Times and Hollywood Reporter and IGN reporting on the return of EC Comics, right? And you just know you're in the moment, and you just gotta appreciate that. But you also have to appreciate when you're just grinding it out and you're trying really hard to place that exclusive excerpt that you just haven't connected with the right reader or the right outlet yet, and you have to find the joy in that.
You see, this is what I do. This is why I do this podcast, is so that the learning those lessons is the reason that keeps me going. You talked in another interview, and it's something that I have talked a lot about with clients and with just friends, is always be watching other industries and how things are shifting for them. I know that you talked quite a bit. I don't even remember now, that it's all a blur, but you talked quite a bit about how you do watch what is resonating over here that we might be able to bring to the work we're doing.
Where should comics, creators, publicists, marketers, where should we be looking right now for what's coming next? Like, who is ahead of us, do you think?
Comics probably does a better job at marketing than comics, all caps comics, gets credit for. I'm going to give you a non-answer, but it is the real answer.
Okay.
I don't. First of all, I think that right now, because of the systemic challenges that every single creative medium is facing, I'm not necessarily sure that there's like a best-in-class scenario. I would say looking overseas, whether you're looking at like K-pop, like Taylor Swift has, in terms of marketing trends or how to build out your fandom, probably a good model, a good path. But I think largely the real question is, how do people in comics sort of do what they think makes sense for their audience without being beholden to it? And when can you take lessons for reaching one audience and apply it to another? So what I mean by that is we are marketing floppies, then books, or crowdfunding, podcasts, whatever the content is. How often should we be continuing to make trailers for comics because there is a press appetite, or there has previously been a press appetite for those, or because it's a visual medium and it harkens to film or TV adaptations, versus how much should we be looking into adopting some of the marketing practices from Kickstarter and finding a way to bring those into your brick and mortar experience?
I've spent a lot of time looking at K-pop. Obviously, I think that you're right about the way those fandoms are being built and how they're being, serviced feels like the wrong word, but it is close. It rhymes with that, right? How do you engage with that audience and continue to build that relationship with that audience? I think they've done an amazing work over there. I've recently gone back and started looking at how NFTs were built. I'm fascinated by that like little moment in time when there were people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and how they were able to build that. I'm really these days. I'm actually working on hopefully an explainer video for. I don't want to spoil it. But there is a big social trend that happened recently that I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by the moments where marketers make very specific decisions that shift the entire culture. Right. I heard a story about the people who were bringing Pokemon to the West, and the way they did that was to send VHS tapes to certain kids in elementary schools. That moment like shifted our entire cultural exchange for generations, and how they handled that. Like, how is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, how is it continually being readapted? Anyway, these are the things that fascinate me, and I'm always trying to figure out how do we learn them. And I work so much with small press that it's always curious to me where that secret is going to come in from again, and how do you make that shift for people?
To piggyback off of sort of like the non-answer that I've given you, is like we really are living in a transitional time. And one of my clients was telling me recently about a podcast that he'd listened to that was speaking to the fact that so much of the nostalgia and our current climate is based around the fact that nobody can imagine the future currently. You recede into, I love physical media, right?
Yeah.
I hypothetically might have gotten rid of all of the Halloween costumes in one of our closets and put them in the garage and created our own little Criterion closet so that we could get to all of the Blu-rays that we accumulated over the pandemic. But I bring that up because, you know, you're seeing the return of cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Vinyl, I get. Vinyl, there's something really like sensual and pleasing about like getting up and like flipping over the record and the hiss of the needle. I grew up on cassettes. They were terrible, right?
They were awful.
Like, they're breaking. The sound quality is terrible. It's stretching out, right? Like,
Yeah.
I liked mixtapes. Mixtapes were amazing. But we are culturally leaning into all these things because it feels like we're at the end of so many different legacies. And at a time, especially like I find the phone is terrible for what it's done. I mean, everybody knows this, but like to our attention spans. And I think that part of like the warmth of going back to a cassette or a VHS tape is that sense that like you are in your pod and you will not be interrupted and you can experience something.
I agree with that. I also think that there's something very visceral that we want from culture that is hard to get when it's in a purely digital environment. And I think that's part of why comic shops are doing so well when all of other retail is suffering, is that it's a warm home. It's a place where you can touch things and you can deal with people, and everything else becomes so artificial that this moment, this place is real. I think that's, I don't know. These are all pet theories though. So who knows, you know. We're actually going to get I have a series of 3 questions I like to end up with these days. And the third one is actually going to go back to something we're just talking about. And I feel like now, you know, we're getting to a place where I get this like panic at the end of a conversation. There's so much I wanted to cover that we didn't, you know, this, but you hit on some of it. Is how do you think about this, that we do in a serious way when there's so much else that seems more serious going on outside our windows? And for you, a jackhammer is a perfect metaphor for that.
I don't want to embarrass him, but my son just wrapped up an internship on Capitol Hill this past summer. So he's like a, you know, just really smart, sophisticated kid who wants to get out there and like be engaged in the process. And for me, the kind of stories and the kind of art that I like is where things are working more as metaphor. And for most of my adult life, I felt like the thing, like, I'm not going to run for office. I'm not going to go. I did go door to door for the environment for one summer, but you know, like you have a few people come after you with guns, and you think, hey, I'm making minimum wage to do this. Let's try something else. I felt like what I could do. I have a very unique skill set. Was to go out and get people to care about art that spoke to serious topics. And so that's kind of what I lean into. If I pay too much attention to the news, it's not necessarily a good thing for me. I am happy to have my family have long conversations about the future of democracy and all the things that we should be talking about. Obviously, that is important. But for me, like the devil's in the details, the reward is in the work. And so, like, I wrote my college essay about Piss Christ.
I remember that.
Yeah. And so it's not a surprise then to like the fact that I end up working for Oni Press and getting to work with Maya on genderqueer and doing all of the helping to support all of the work that Hunter Goranson and Sierra Hahn and Spencer Simpson do with, say, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. So to me, in a world where there's so many challenges, politically, economically, socially, for us and for the future of humanity, I feel like at least I know where I can make hopefully the most impact.
Yeah.
I know books and I know comics and I know press and I know how to have a conversation about these things. How to develop a community in a political community built for the future, that I don't have a vision for. How to rally the troops of librarians and people who read, that I've had a vision for a long time, and that I find the reward. But there's a reason why I'm not like beyond the skill set, like not a doctor.
Right.
I take this very seriously, right? Like I live and dream, like, for fun. I was working with a cartoonist a couple of years ago, and I was reading the history of Akira and something that Otomo had done to promote Akira. I was like, hey, did you ever hear about this thing that they did years ago? It's like, we should do something left of center like that. Like that, not steal that idea, but how do we come up with something weird like that? That to me is like kind of where I can make my impact in a way that I'm very sensitive to the moment that we're living in. I just don't have a path for how we get there,
Yeah. No, and I think that what you and I do brings that value and brings that connection during a time when everyone feels disconnected. And in many ways, the reason that things are the way they are is because of that disconnection. And I don't know. Maybe I'm fooling myself into giving it value, but I hope that that's what we're doing. What do you think is the biggest challenge or the biggest risk facing the comics industry at the moment? What is that right now?
Yeah, to me, we've sort of covered that before, and not to be hyperbolic about it, but it is the biggest challenge facing humanity right now, which is that people aren't reading in the way that they were. And if you look at different points of recent history, it was seen like being able to read was something you aspired to. Clearly, not everybody did it necessarily, right? But like, you wanted that opportunity to it, and we've shifted away from that. And to me, in a world where people aren't reading as much as they have previously, like, how do we cultivate? It's not even like the next generation of readers, because to me that's missing the actual problem, right? It's like, how do we get lapsed readers, not just of comics, but of newspapers, or like, how do you reward culturally the kind of curiosity that has existed at its best in the past around the arts? That to me is the fundamental challenge. Like, how do you do that in a way that's not condescending, right? How do you do that in a way that is like actually fun and engaging, and invites more people into the room?
Wow. Amen. Great question. And I hope that we both continue to ask and try and find answers. What gives you hope for the future of our industry?
This is my really sentimental answer, but it's also the real one, which is the kids, the truth, like the level of excitement that I see from kids reading manga, kids discovering the DC universe through the absolute titles. Kids like who want to check out the new Left of Center comic because they read Pee Pee Poo Poo and they're like, what the hell is this? Carolyn Cash is crazy brilliant, right?
Yeah.
That's what gives us me hope. It's not just like the next generation, but the way, and I feel probably more of an affinity for the kinds of questions and the kind of text that generation of younger readers is seeking out right now. That gives me hope.
I love that a lot. Okay, this is something that I'm really looking forward to asking you all week, and my team and I are in the process of building a physical magazine to go into comic shops about comics, all caps, as you mentioned earlier. It's a challenge building a for-print magazine from scratch. You have been in this game for as long as you have, and all the wide variety of skills and experiences you've had. What would you be thinking about right now for building that as an entity?
Well, you're gonna fire Zdarsky, right?
Oh fuck yeah, that guy's out.
So first of all, I love what you're doing. I might have been having some conversations with people at a certain point, parallel to the discussions that you were having with people behind the scenes without me I was not aware of what you guys were pivoting towards.
I think we've mentioned at least one of them here. Yeah.
I'm impressed by all the decisions that I've seen so far. Be patient. Find patient people. With some resources, like with this is I don't mean to sugarcoat some of the press challenges or the overall challenges that the industry faces right now. Sure. But I think one of the things that I find frustrating is that the bulk of people who had money previously, and by people I don't mean people, I mean companies that had money, still have money. Yes, sometimes in this particular industry, the ripple effect, the changes of distribution, the printing costs, trying to pay artists more money to do has caused very real inflation. But there is still a level of corporate dollar which is not being reinvested back into the industry. And so if I had spent some time trying to think about launching a print periodical for the industry a while ago, I probably would have made a list of who I thought actually had money and what my pitch would be to them to invest in it, because we need as people who have been successful doing this for years, invest in the future. Right. And on a minor level, I try to do that by I back a lot, not every single crowdfunding campaign I work on, but I back the majority of crowdfunding campaigns that I worked on, which is it's just a little ripple, frankly, but it is your commitment to the community, and places that have a modicum of corporate funding. You need to find a way to invite them in without giving up control of what you care about, which is editorial approval, right? You don't want to walk all the way back to the days of Wizard magazine where the editor-in-chief could go in and, throw a ruckus if they weren't happy with the coverage, and then the coverage would change, kind of thing. But I do think that you need to remind the current tastemakers in the industry why they need to invest in a print publication. I think it's incredibly important.
I invite you to take a good look at my messy office and see if there's anything here that you would like that I can trade you for that list, because now that is the only thing in the world that I'm really hoping to get out of this. David, thank you. Gosh, thank you so much. I'm going to be digging deep into this one in my notes, and the transcript of this conversation has been wonderful. Is there anything in particular you'd like to impart to our audience that before we close this out?
One of my favorite comic podcasts had the best sign-off of all time to me, which was simply read more comics. And I think we could just amend that to read more. Again, not in a condescending way, but to me, it is life. We just got back from a trip to visit our kid yesterday. And as we're walking around the bookstore, we're like buying like 8 books. And like, I'm a slow reader now. Like, Adam, I don't know how, if you were fat, I am a slow reader at this point in my life.
It's just gotten worse. It's gotten worse and worse. Yeah.
But I cannot walk into like a favorite bookstore and not buy multiple books. Like, it is a but it is the best problem. And, and you know, again, both my wife and I both read a book on a plane, and it was great because we had terrible Wi-Fi. So at a certain point, I was like, I'm just going to read this little novella and enjoy my time and be completely engaged in the text, and incredibly grateful that people aren't texting me every 5 minutes. So turn off your phones, read some, call your mom.
Somebody is going to be angry with me for not using this as a call to action for the podcast, but I'm going to let that live. Just read more. Thank you, David. This has been wonderful. Cannot say thank you enough. And go listen to Dave's podcast, the Superfan podcast, available right now on all platforms. You absolutely should be listening to it. I personally really enjoyed the one with Matt Kent that I listened to earlier today.
That's great.
He's a gem. Yeah,
he really is. You know, it helps to have some of the most kind and generous guests.
As I am grateful for as well. Thank you, brother. We'll talk soon.